Hello, everybody. It is such a delight to have read your stories and to have found how you can improve, but also what you've done really well. I was so impressed with the level of writing in these stories, how you guys grasped emotion and story and plot. Honestly, you did a fantastic job, and everything that I'm about to bring up, adults and published authors still struggle with today. So this is something that I'll even admit that some of these things I struggle with, and I'm going to show you the techniques on how to overcome them as best you can. To start with, we're going to look at paragraph sizes. Now, a paragraph is a way that a reader is able to read that snippet, know that they've got that information, and then carry on down the story because the end of that paragraph has made them want to keep reading. A really good thing that comes into play here is looking at the edge of your story. So, normally, I have... Oh, hang on. I have a book here that I've been reading for a while now, and there's some really good examples of what to do and what not to do. Now, this is a large print book. It's not because I'm blind, it's just how it came. But I do make my books large print so people that are blind can read them. But you can see here, this edge is nice and straight. This edge is straight here, which would actually make this paragraph a bit too long. But then it juts in and out as dialogue happens and as a scene change happens down the bottom here. That line going in and out like it was, that makes it easy for the reader to follow. And if you find that you've got a whole page, which unfortunately I have some really good examples in my very first book, in the first edition, where it is just pages of blocks of text and they are not paragraphs where they should be. So it's really good to make sure that you have about 3 to 5 sentences, and then those sentences are clumped into a paragraph so that your reader has an easier flow of reading. You want each paragraph to make a specific point before it moves on to the next thing that's happening. You don't want these to be too long. You also want them to be short enough without feeling like the reader is jumping too quickly. There's a little art to this, and it just takes practice. So what I would recommend is making sure that when you read your story, you can highlight what the different ideas are in different colors. Not only does this make it a fun and very pretty exercise that you can pop onto YouTube or TikTok of the work that you're doing and how you're improving, but which is something that I do as a marketer, but also you get to see the colors of where your ideas are sitting. That really helps the reader. They don't need to see the colors. It's just for you. But they get to feel that essence of what you've done. They get to know that those paragraphs meant something and it keeps the story flow going. So just have a look and make sure that your long paragraphs are actually sorted. You don't want them to be too long, and you don't want that whole big brick of text taking up the page and making it difficult to read. Now, the next one is one of my favorite ones. It is scene descriptions. Something that a lot of you had a great time doing was scene descriptions, but I wanted a little bit more from you. I wanted a bit more knowledge and a bit more understanding of where your characters were and what they were meant to be feeling, because not only does that create the atmosphere of your book, but it also helps us stand where they are standing. It helps us empathize with your characters and feel what they are feeling so that we're more involved in the story. Now, a really easy way to do this is just go over the 5 senses. Now, you don't want to do this all at the start either. So you don't start your whole book with Wolflock was in a dry carriage, it was jostling him around, and he could smell the polished wood, he could feel the seats beneath him and the type of fabric that he was sitting on. He felt uncomfortable in his tight, well-to-do clothes. So you don't want to do that in your first paragraph. It's not a really good way to set it up. What you want is for there to be action and emotion in your first paragraph that gets the reader hooked. This is commonly called your hook. So the first sentence in your first paragraph should be something gripping. In the old Wolflock cases, so the ones before I had a proper editor and before I started learning more about storycraft, the old ones was this big paragraph about how beautiful the local woods were and how it was autumn. And it was like you're looking at the world and you're zooming in on the point. And that is not the worst beginning that I have written or read, but it is definitely not the best. Now it begins with the same line that the entire series will end with, and I feel much more proud of it. It's still slow, but it has an element of what does she mean? And that first line for me and for the first wolf, I'm trying to look around for one. I normally have the whole kit and caboodle here for me to just pick up and show you, but right now they are hiding. Now, I can't remember what the original book's manuscript had as its first line because it was forgettable. I can remember what the new manuscript has, what the new book has as its first line, and it is: the orange light glinting through the window signified the end of Wolflock. Full stop. Now, that's a really good one for this style of book. Gives you a bit of what is happening, what is ending, how is it ending, and you get a sense of there is orange light, so it's either dawn or dusk, glinting through the window, or worse, there's a fire outside and something else is happening. But you want to know what the orange light signifies, and you want to know why is Wolflock, this person that is just newly named, ending. So for me, I was quite proud of that. There's probably better ways to start it off, but I feel quite proud of that, and I feel like that's a really good finishing line as well, because I love a good circle when you finish the way you begin, and with short stories, that's a lot of fun. So, when it comes to a scene description, going all the way back, I've had a coffee, you're getting the best of me. When you go all the way back to the scene description, you don't start with they're in this room, they're feeling these things, they're smelling these things, they're wearing these clothes, this is what they look like. That is very amateur. And now you are going to be masters. You start with a bit of action, you start with intrigue, you start with something that's going to get your reader to read the next line. Dramatic. In the next line is where you start to explain what they're interacting with. So, for instance, in that scene, Wolflock is hiding under the covers of his bed because he doesn't want to go to a ball. And so I explain he's hiding under the plush duvet or doona or blanket. And I describe the fabric that he's gripping onto. I describe he can hear, because it's from Wolflock's perspective, we'll get into perspectives in a second, he can hear his sister speaking, and he can hear her kicking her shoes against the dresser that she's sitting on. So he can hear these things, he can feel this blanket. He shouldn't have been able to see the orange light. That was just for the audience. More than anything, that was for the audience, more than Wolflock. But then I don't mention smell, because there's nothing worthwhile to smell at that moment. Later on, if there was something worthwhile to smell, like when he's on the docks, he can be smelling river fish. He can be smelling the fresh water of the river. So you know it's a freshwater river and not a salt river. And then that tells you what sort of creatures are in there and what grows on the banks of the river. That would tell you that you're probably more likely to see salt or silt rather than mud and dirt and stone along the edges of this river, because geography. So he will smell things when the smell means something. He will see things when the sight means something. Seeing the big ships with their sails like banners. Beautiful. Love it. And then he will feel things when that means something. So if he's taking note of the roads that the carriage is going along that aren't quite looked after, or perhaps they're very well looked after because the local government wants to make a good impression from the docks, where they're receiving a lot of new people and tourists and business people, and then they're coming to the town. So maybe they look after this road really well. Maybe they are at the end of a particular cycle of looking after the road. So you can throw some politics into that. Oh, I love it. I love it. Details show you so much, and symbolism shows you so much. It's so juicy. It's my bread and butter. So you have auditory, so you have your hearing, you have your vision, so your sight, you have your smell. Those three are normally the easiest ones to pop into a story. Then you have to look at your character and look at what they might be able to taste. So, for instance, if your character is at the docks like Wolflock, sorry, getting some messages through. There we go. So if your character is at the docks like Wolflock and he walks past someone and he can't just smell the cologne this person is wearing, but he's tasting it, it's leaving that awful layer on his tongue, like someone that's sprayed too much deodorant or too much perfume on themselves. When that happens, you can explain that, and that's probably relevant to your story or relevant to the culture of what is happening in your story. So you've got sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. Yes, that's 5. There's other senses biologically, like temperature and moisture, but normally when we're writing, we just want to look at those 5. Those 5 interlaced through the first part of your story where they're relevant will give your audience the footing that they need to feel like they are standing where your characters are standing. The next thing that I want to talk about, so we've done long paragraphs, a little bit of pacing, a little bit of perspective, but we'll get onto those later. We've done scene descriptions, which I know now you're going to make very juicy. And then we have one of the things that is very confusing for a reader, and it's head hopping. This comes from perspectives. Perspectives are where you would start using pronouns in your book. For instance, if you want someone to have a very close perspective when they're reading your book, you put them in first person perspective. That is where you're using the word I, me, and my. So, I walked down the banks. I walked onto the ship. I bought a treat while I was waiting to board the ship. That sort of thing. I'm the one that's tasting the flavors. I'm the one that's breathing the air. And so it puts your reader really close to your main character. They are inside the main character. That is a really good way of making sure that your reader is right up in the action. I believe the Twilight series is written in first person, which is one of the reasons it was very successful. A lot of romances are written in first person. Oh my gosh, one of the best examples of first person, I'm pretty sure it's first person, is The Children of Blood and Bone. The Children of Blood and Bone, oh my gosh, what a legendary book. It's fantastic series. Tommy does such a brilliant job, and she brings this whole world to life, and you are right in the thick of it. You are feeling the pain of the characters. You are feeling the magic that flows through them. You're feeling the rage against injustice, and you're feeling the desperation right from the get-go. Oh, glorious. Children of Blood and Bone, highly recommend. Then, so you've got first-person perspective, puts your reader in the skin of your protagonist. Then you have second-person perspective. The only places I've really seen this used is poetry and fanfiction. But there's so many other applications for it, I just haven't read those books. And second person is you, your, yours. So it's saying what you are doing. So it's another step away from first person, where they're in the body. Now it's you directing the reader as to what they're doing. So second perspective, or second person perspective, is a complicated one, and it's not very common. But I would love to see people experiment with it more. You do not have to. Here in this book exactly is great for first person and the one we're getting into now, which is third person. Third person has a few different ways of looking at things, and my favourite one is third person close perspective. Third person is she, he, they. It is Harry Potter, Aragon, Lord of the Rings. It is what are they called? Not the Dangerous Artifacts, the one by not Christopher Paolini. Anyway, Terry Pratchett. All of his books are written in third person. I've got so many of them here. What am I looking at? No. You've also got the Dragon Rider series. You've got the Dragon Keeper series as well. All of them are written in third person. I think Dragon Keeper is written in third person. That means that you are, as the reader, looking over the shoulder of the main character. The closer you are to that shoulder, the closer the perspective is. So, third person close perspective is you with your chin on the main character's shoulder, listening to everything they're listening to and feeling everything they're feeling. There's a degree of separation because you know you are not Harry Potter in that. You know you are not Bilbo Baggins in that. They're referring to someone else with a different name. But you are very close to the action because you are right there. You have more distant perspectives the further you go back. And sometimes you'll have quite a wide perspective where you're very distant from the main character as you are reading the story. Now, I do find that Lord of the Rings can actually be quite distant from the main character. There's so many characters, but they don't do Tolkien doesn't do the thing where in the same scene he'll have two different characters' perspectives, as much as I see other writers do. Now that's what I want to talk about, because when you are writing in first, second, or third person, if you are going to change perspective, you need to change the scene. What that means is that you will be writing your paragraphs from a single person's perspective, and then you'll have a gap, much like the one that we just looked at here. Hang on. Here we go. In this book, you can see the scene break is here. So you've got these paragraphs doing their thing, but the scene break has a big gap between the two lines. That means that a whole new scene has started. And it's not quite a new chapter, but it's a new scene. I would recommend against head hopping and changing perspectives. I think that it's unnecessary. I think that it overcomplicates things. And I think that even in the case of books that are a bit older for you, which like Game of Thrones and that sort of thing, I think it's very jarring and it takes the reader out of the immersion that you want them to be in. There's, in the Aragon series, in the final book, there's a whole weird section where you're finally getting the perspective. You've been in Aragon's head the whole time, third person, close to his shoulder. You've been on this ride with him the whole time. And then there's this weird chapter where you're in Saphira's head and you're listening to her thoughts and her perspectives, and it's one chapter, and it's so out of place and unnecessary, and I don't really think it fits at all, and it just felt kind of wrong to understand the perspective of that dragon at that moment. If Christopher Paolini had been doing that the whole way through, and it's like one chapter for Aragon, one chapter for Saphira the dragon, and then back again, it would make a lot more sense. And romance writers do that. They will often do one chapter from the main character and then one chapter for the main character's love interest. Some horror writers do it too in the exact same format, where it's the main character's perspective and then the monster's perspective. Both of those can work really well. At this stage though, I would highly recommend not doing that. You want to really hone your skills as a writer before you start doing perspective changes. You want to really and thoroughly understand your character and the characters around them through their perspective. For instance, Harry Potter does this quite well. In the very first Harry Potter book, in just a few chapters in, after Harry gets to Hogwarts, he says he thought that Snape despised him, that Snape disliked him. And then he says, but he was wrong. Snape hated him. Now, we know that even though it's a very firm statement, Harry is assuming these things, especially when we get to the last book. And the reason for that is it's all been from Harry's perspective. And then it goes into the chapter of why Harry thinks this is the case. It's all Harry's thoughts and his perspectives. We never hear the inside of Snape's head where he is saying, no, I absolutely despise that Potter child. We only ever hear from Harry. And I think that's a really crucial thing. Everything is from Harry's perspective. He doesn't know who's lying to him, who's telling the truth to him, who likes him, and what their actual opinions are, unless it's all over their face, unless they say it outright, and then they may still be being deceptive. It's a great tool to use, and it keeps suspense for your audience. It keeps suspense for your reader to only know and to only be in the shell of your main character. It's really important to understand that when you get to the stage where you can write from multiple perspectives, they still need to be separated. Please don't put them into the same chapter and just have this rolling head hopping happening. It's very jarring, and it takes the reader out of the story because they start getting confused about who's feeling what and why. So, head hopping, keep everything in one character until you deliberately change the scene and it's going to another character's perspective. Now, I think it's great to write from different perspectives. When I'm writing the Wolflock cases, I will often start by writing from the villain's perspective, but I don't put it in these books. I don't put the villain's perspective in here. I write from the villain's perspective so I know why they committed the crime, and I know what they made as mistakes, and why those clues are going to be there later for Wolflock to find. Everything else is from Wolflock's perspective, third person, close perspective. So you, as the reader, are sitting right there on Wolflock's shoulder while he goes through these adventures and finds these clues. And there are some people that are more clever than Wolflock and will solve the case before him, because even though they're all looking at the same clues in the same place, from your perspective, you can put them together faster. Now, so we've done, you guys are hanging in there great, and I really appreciate it. I hope that this information is sinking in, and if you have any questions, please just pop them in the comments below. I'll be happy to elaborate more, make more videos on this, and get more information to you, because these things can make or break a story when it comes to your reader enjoying it. Now, they're not going to make or break your stories, because these stories that you've written are fantastic. These are just little fine-tuning points that will hone your writing later. There is no one whose story was written so poorly that these things need to be done to save the story. Instead, these things are just going to enhance your stories. This is just polishing, not fixing. So we've done long paragraphs, scene descriptions, and head hopping, so perspectives. The next thing we're going to look at is repeating phrases. This comes with experience, and it comes with a good thesaurus and an understanding of English for everyone writing in English. It comes from a good understanding of language. And as writers and as authors, you already have a love for language. You have a love for the written word, and it's exciting to start to research and to learn more words that can fit into your story better. I am terrible for using the word so. I will start lots of sentences with so, comma, blah, 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 blah. I also tend to use the word blinked a lot to show surprise. It'll be something like Wolflock blinked or Mothy blinked rapidly. And I think I use the word sinister a lot as well. And so I will go on to the document that I was writing on, whether it's a Google Sheet, or a Word doc or a note, and I will just Control F, and it will find the words. It will have a look at how many uses I have made of those words, and then I can go back through and see if there's a better way to describe the scene, or if there's a better way for me to fit in a different way of saying this. Sometimes it's just a changing of the word, and sometimes it's a rewriting of the whole sentence. But when you have that variety, it keeps the reader more intrigued, and it stops it from, if you've ever driven a shopping trolley that's got like a lump on the wheel, it stops the lumpy wheel effect of, oh right, that's right, it's here, oh wait, there it is again, that sort of stuff. I always get a giggle because I remember, I think it was in the 4th Harry Potter book, J.K. Rowling had just discovered the word incredulous. And so many of her responses to characters were, Harry scoffed incredulously. And so that's just something that sticks out to me. So when you are reading published books, you find that these words will keep cropping up, and they start to take you out of the story the more you see them. So you want them blended evenly through the canvas of your writing. That's repeating phrases. Now let's have a look at pacing. So pacing is an art. It is something that will change for every story you write, and it's something that today we require a different level of pacing to what used to be. The pacing in Lord of the Rings is very, very slow until it's not. But for the most of the book, it is very slow. The pacing in action books is very fast. That's what you're after. The pacing in books that resemble Dungeons and Dragons often goes from very slow, long exposition, so long scene descriptions and history descriptions, to very fast and applies to the rules of the game. Spy books and mystery books are often slow in sections, and then speed, all these things happen, and then slow again. Romance books will have a more slow, gentle, beautiful, little bit of speed up, and then slow, gentle, beautiful again, and then a little bit of speed up. But that's what's happening in the action. Within the person, it feels like every moment is quite intense. Now, with your pacing, there's a few things that I've seen in your stories that actually slow things down. A key thing that slows things down is memory sequences, flashbacks, and dream sequences. These ones don't normally need to go into a book. If you can't just reference the past or show something that is from the past to anchor people in the present. So, for instance, one of the stories was about a race. Absolutely phenomenal. It was so intense. It was such a good story, but there was a flashback sequence that did slow it down quite a bit. I think that the flashback sequence could be either put right at the very start, so you're either in the past, everything you're seeing feels like the present. So take the flashback sequence from the middle, put it right in the past, and then go into the action of the present moment. So you have the build up there. You have the, oh, what is happening from the audience? They're like, oh, okay, we're in a scene, we're feeling these things, this is quite nice, this is quite sweet. Oh my gosh, what was that? Oh my gosh, what's happening? Oh my gosh, we're here now? Oh, excellent. All right, I can see how the dots have connected. That sort of thing can really help with pacing. Starting slow is very common. So even in Aragon, the slow start is him going hunting, finding the egg, not knowing what it is, thinking it's a rock, going to the butcher. And then he goes back to the farm. So it takes ages for the dragon to be born, and there's no real action that happens. There's nothing that speeds things up until the dragon is born, until Saphira is born. the start of Harry Potter is also very slow. The whole first chapter is just going through the life of the Dursleys with a few weird things happening. I'm trying to think, are there any other books that have a nice slow start? The Dragon Keeper series starts with the life of this unnamed slave girl, and how she cares for these monsters that are in the dark, and the terrible life that she's living. So there's a setup for how they live. You don't have space for that in your stories to do a full big setup, but 1 or 2 paragraphs of what could have been, like if you have any flashbacks, or if you have any like flashbacks or backstory things that need to go in the story for context, please put them at the start as if you are there experiencing them then, and then have a scene cut that brings you forward and explain why you are now forward or where you are. That will increase your pacing. You also want to look at making sure that when you want to speed your pacing up, you have shorter sentences, and this will help with your paragraphs getting too long. So short, sharp sentences increase the pacing, much like how I'm speaking at the moment. And then, if you want longer, softer, gentler areas, you start speaking in sentences, or you start writing in sentences that are themselves longer. This slows down the pacing. If you want to speed it back up again, you go back to quick, sharp, short sentences. So, there's, like I said, there's a huge art with pacing, but those are the basic things that will either speed up or slow down your book. Another thing to do with pacing is, and I think everyone did this beautifully, everyone that came to the first talk, you did a fantastic job of this. And this is lessons from Trey Parker, where you never have an and then. This happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this person arrived, and then they did this. So never have an and then. What you do have is a therefore. This person arrived. Therefore, these people spoke. Therefore, these things then happened. It is the natural progression of why things are happening. They drive each other forward. But then, when you throw in a but then, you increase your pacing. So therefores, slow your pacing down gently. Not too much. Sometimes they just keep it even. But they normally slow it down a little bit, and they give you breathing time. And then you have a but then that speeds everything up, because a but then throws a spanner in the works, and it makes things more tense and more exciting. It makes something, puts something in conflict. So, you go from your therefores to your but thens. So if you want to increase your pacing, you put in your but thens. With a short story, and with most stories, you do want some form of equal amount of but thens and therefores. Unless all of the but thens come back together in a very strong therefore. What I mean by that is, if you're writing a mystery, what you want to do is make sure that all of the clues you're writing come back together. So all of those clues may be a but then. But then they discovered this. But then this fell into their laps. But then this was revealed. All of those things separate like a big spider web, and therefore they all have to come back together again so that you have everything untangled. I hope that makes sense. And it's always really satisfying if everything comes back together, and then you find out that that final therefore starts to have just not quite the right explanation for one of those threads. Just one. You don't really want more than one being loose. If too many are loose, it feels like the story is unfinished. But when you have all of them pulled back together, and you're like, oh yes, this all makes sense, this is all fine, I love this, the ending is nice and wrapped up, how satisfying is that? I feel like I've gone on such a good journey. But then one thread just seems to come a bit loose, a little bit, it doesn't quite fit. Oh, I love that so much. It leads you on and be like, oh, but now I want more. What? Wait, where does this one thread go? This is very important. I need to know where this one thread goes. So those things are what help to increase your pacing and decrease your pacing. as well as sentence structure that will help increase and decrease your pacing. The next thing I want to talk about is trying to maintain a consistent tense. Now, your tenses are the time that your story is written. Is it written in the present tense? Now, tenses can be very tricky, and so I would recommend leaning on the editing part of your app or your software. So, for instance, if you're using Microsoft Word, it will normally highlight where the tense feels off, which is good. But you can also ask the editor to give you a hand with this as well. Anyway, so your tenses are present tense, past tense, and future tense. Present tense is here and now. Things are happening now. I pick up the pen. I drink from the water bottle. I speak now. Past tense is the most common form that you read books in these days. And it is, I picked up the pen. I drank from the water bottle. I spoke. So I said those things in the past. Then you have future tense. She was going to pick up the pen. Future tense is very tricky. I don't recommend using it unless you're talking about prophecy. I'm trying to think of other ways to say she was going to drink from the water bottle. She opened her mouth to speak. That's more present tense as well. So future tense, leave that one alone. It's too complicated even for me. And my brain is not geared for that. Past and present tense are the ones you want to be writing in. Future tense is a bit ethereal. And then finally, I think we've spoke about this a little bit already, we're looking at the endings. So we want to make sure you've got a nice solid ending. Everything is wrapped up at the end. Except for that one thread. No, I'm kidding. You can have absolutely everything wrapped up and it's a really satisfying ending, but please make sure that everything is addressed in that final wrap up. Now, you don't have to wrap up everything right at the very end. You can wrap things up prior that help with the story flow and give space to the really important things at the end. Or what you can do is find a way to cleverly tie them all up together. Endings can be tricky. I get it. Endings can be very tricky, especially when you know in your mind there may be more to come. But you do want to find some kind of peace at the end of your book. You want to find some kind of resolution at the end of your story. And that resolution is the main conflict of your current story needing to be resolved in some way. There are certain ways you can do this. So you can do it directly. For instance, if you've got, going back to the Wolflock cases, the way to do this directly is the ship is not moving, the captain is missing. Wolflock needs to find out why the captain is missing. The reason the captain is missing is because his pet is missing, and he's very sad, and he doesn't want to leave his captain's cabin. He's very embarrassed because of other reasons. Wolflock goes to find his pet. And the end of the book, spoilers, it's book 1, you'll get through it. Spoilers are Wolflock goes to the end of the book and he finds the pet and then he returns it to the captain. And so that ties up that thing. The ship is then able to leave. Wolflock has solved the case. What is not tied up is little clues that he found throughout the ship and people that he spoke to and interactions that he had that started to draw into other areas. And you start to think, well, why would this person say this? What did this tattoo mean on this person if it was not relevant to this case? And so because it's the first book out of 10, it has a few loose threads, but none of them seem important enough to pay too much attention to until much later. The main story is all tied up, neat little bow at the end. You feel satisfied that there has been a resolution. That could also be one of the stories had a girl trying to snoop on the presents and the party ideas that her sisters were putting together for her, and finding out what that surprise is at the end, as intended by the sisters, It's a pretty good way to wrap all of that up. There was a good dystopian one as well, but there wasn't quite enough tying everything at the ends together. There were too many things left out. And so what you want to do is identify what the main conflict of this story is and then tie it up at the end. You can still leave your loose threads. They could still be, perhaps it looks like they were looking for their mother, or they were looking for a long-lost sibling. They may not find their long-lost sibling at the end, but they find a very important thing that will lead them to their sibling. Or, worse, they find their sibling dead. They find that they think that they don't need to continue that pursuit anymore. Pixar movies do this very well. The hero starts off on a journey and they think, I want this thing. So, for instance, in the first Toy Story movie, Woody, as the main character, wants to get rid of Buzz. And then, by the end of it, he realizes, actually, my happiness of getting rid of Buzz would not make... Oh, excuse me. Oh, thank you. I'll cut that out. My happiness of getting rid of Buzz would make Andy, the person that I actually love, sad. So, what if Buzz became my friend and we got to play together? All of the Pixar movies do things like this. People start with thinking that they want a specific thing, and then it turns out they didn't want that. That wasn't going to really make them happy by the end. What they wanted was something different all along. It was not something so different that it wouldn't make any sense. I think that's a key thing to remember here. You don't want your character to be like, oh, well, you know, I was looking for my long-lost family, or I was looking for my missing pet, and now I'm going to go home and ride dinosaurs. It's like, what? Where'd the dinosaurs come from? Don't do things like that. What you're after is something that makes sense, that circumvents what the reader initially thought they needed, along with the main character. Those things are what's going to help you make a fantastic ending. Many of you wrote brilliant endings, and you don't need to change them. You don't need to touch them up. It will be in your editor's notes. But this video is purely to get you to think about other aspects of story writing, to improve on any of the comments that were made, and to make sure that you know that there's other options for writing as well as you continue writing and becoming authors. So I hope you've gotten a lot out of this session today. Like I said, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments below. I would love to answer any and all of them for you. And I can't wait to read what you write next. You did fantastic jobs. Your pacing was great in most of the stories. You were intriguing. You wrote so well. It was so advanced for your ages. The story construction, the character development, and the emotion behind the characters was spot on. So I think all of you should be incredibly proud about that. And for most of them, I would love to see them in full-fledged books. Not just a short story, but I would love to read the entire thing. So feel so proud of yourselves. And I will see you next Saturday for our post-editing chats that we have. And I hope that you were able to tidy up any parts of the story and polish it so that it is brilliant. Have a fantastic day. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again.